Hello and welcome everyone to a Comic Movie Marks video. So we got a little bit of downtime here on news in the Marvel and DC universe, the comic book universe as it is. So now that DC only has one movie coming out this year, and Walter Hamada stayed pretty quiet, and for the most part, everybody's pretty quiet right now. Websites need to start pulling up shit on Marvel.
Yeah.
So they need to try their best to somehow talk shit about Marvel without completely taking the dick out of their mouth. So we have CBR.com, 16 bad MCU decisions that diehard fans
inexplicably
defend. Sorry.
That's okay.
I scrolled down to look at something, and then I forgot where I was.
What? You mean CBR.com is actually going to talk some shit on the MCU? The other hilarious part about this,
it's not that much of shit.
I'm sure they'll probably defend it themselves. But I also recognize this name, Joshua Oliveri, because I remember we were like butchering it. We were like Oliverier, or like we could not figure out what the hell his name was. So kind of funny. I don't remember the other article. I don't really care to even look for it, but
actually I do remember. This was the 50. He did like the things that the DCU stole from the MCU.
Oh, interesting. Damn. How the fuck do you remember that?
Because we kept repeating his name all the time, and he's the guy that said Chris is on a plane or whatever. Too many Chris's on a plane.
Ooh, so this should be good.
Number 16 already looks glorious.
All right, so here we go. Number 16, the color palette is grounded. This is one of those things that once you see, you'll never unsee. Have you ever noticed in terms of the color palette and overall shades of the Marvel movies, for the most part, look the same? Most of them will have these washed out reds and yellows in favor of a blue and gray color palette. Even a movie as visually pleasing as Guardians of the Galaxy has this washed out look to it. Definitely has an issue going forward because comic books are visual spectacles. The movies have to replicate that. However, diehard MCU fans will argue that the color palette is that way on purpose because it's supposed to make the universe feel grounded. Even grounded comic book movies have attractive color schemes.
Way to start off savage there, Joshua. Fucking hardcore.
Oh, yeah.
You nailed him. You fucking nailed them with that one. That was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Put them in their fucking place.
Oh, yeah.
Number 15.
Oh, okay. That all we're going to see? We're not going to talk about the color palette at all? All right. Moving right along.
All right, fuck it.
So, the humor in Guardians 2 was organic. What? Who says that? Guardians of the Galaxy was one of Marvel's most surprising successes. It was a huge risk, taking a property no one had ever heard of and trying to turn it into a popular movie. However, it was one that paid off, having that sort of irreverent humor that made it a memorable experience. Unfortunately, director James Gunn decided that the humor was going to be dialed up for the sequel. Lovers of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 will say that the humor was organic, but that isn't the case. When Drax is talking about his famously huge turds and ego turning into David Hasselhoff, the entire joke takes a viewer out of the movie. That's not to say the film itself was bad, it's just the jokes didn't land as well. All right.
Wow, way to nail it on the Guardians of the Galaxy 2. That's what made you realize
this?
Is that it takes the viewer out of the movie? That's what did it?
And it's only Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Only. Only. Yeah, it's that their humor was the only one that was forced. All right.
No other Marvel movie ever did it. Only
never.
Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Number 14. Thor. Marvel knows how to handle all of their characters. Here's a big argument that we hear a lot. When it was time for the MCU to start adapting their characters, there was no denying that they treated them with a lot of respect and love to make them work on the big screen. Then when it came to the poorly received SpiderMan, Fantastic Four, and X-Men movies, the immediate response was, give them back to Marvel. Yeah, you fucking hear that a lot. The problem here is that Marvel doesn't always know what to do with their characters. 90% of their villains are poorly executed, and some of their heroes aren't nearly as good as their source material. Scarlet Witch has a lot of growing to do. Spider-Man is somewhat of an Iron Man Jr., and we still don't care a lot about Hawkeye.
You could add way more to that list. Quicksilver was useless.
Damn.
Bucky, terrible. Fuck. Thor, especially after Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, so
really give two shits about Thor.
The biggest thing that I've noticed on the characters is they have they can take the liberty. We're going to talk about some things about characters on the DCEU side in upcoming episodes, but the MCU can take liberties with characters. So like Thor goes through this humongous transition of like who he is in the first Thor versus Ragnarok. Tony Stark fits whatever bill they want him to. It doesn't matter. And you know, they can, within reason, just do whatever the fuck they want with the characters, and MCU fans are going to defend it like, yeah, that sounds good. And then, as this said, it
was growth. It was total growth.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then
Thor went from a Norse god to a surfer bro. No problem.
Right. Yeah.
Easy transition. Very easy transition.
Yep, cracking jokes. And yeah, so this is one of the bigger ones for sure, is the characters and how a lot of MCU fans are like, nope, it's growth. I'll accept it exactly who they are. And you're like, what? That to me, that does not seem like, you know, X character. Just fill in the blank there.
Scarlet Witch gives me growth.
Yeah, no shit.
And Black Widow.
Oh yeah.
Push-up bras are amazing. Anyway,
all right, number 13. Disney was good for them. Shortly after the success of Iron Man and the announcement of their cinematic universe, Disney decided they wanted a piece of the action and bought out Marvel Studios. While this increased their potential in the financial department, there's only one direction that the MCU could go from there, and that direction is a mega franchise. Now that Disney...
Mega!
Oh, yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
The mega... Not ultimate. Yeah. It should have been the ultimate franchise.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know why I jumped, I totally misread.
It's the mega powers.
That's what I was trying to think of, and then I jumped into the Ultimate Warrior theme song for some reason, so I totally fucked that up, but I digress. Now that Disney owns Marvel, it's clear that there's a consistency going on. Some of the movies feel like the products that only give Mickey Mouse more money in his pocket. Some fans have argued that the Disney buyout was good for them because it's allowed for even greater success. The problem is that at the end of the day, Marvel's movies are going to be whatever Disney wants them to be. Wow, Joshua.
Way to go.
Hitting the nail on the head. Yes.
Laying down the dick on this one.
Right? He's just whipping it all out. Yeah. So, yeah, all right, moving right along. Number 12, Age of Ultron sequel setup was important to the story. Avengers Age of Ultron was fairly disappointing. No shit, we just covered that one. When you consider how much of a success the first Avengers movie was. One of the reasons for this is that the movie seems to put itself on pause in order to set up events that would be fulfilled in Black Panther, Civil War, and Ragnarok. Some diehard fans of Age of Ultron have stated that they don't mind the sequel setup, even going as far to say that it was important to the story. Even if it weren't necessary to the film, the way it was integrated was poor, as the rest of the movie was stopped in order to address it. Setup is better when it's always at a backseat rather than being the backseat driver.
Whatever, it was just a boring as fuck movie, and it made no sense.
Yeah, I agree that it was definitely trying to set up for a lot, and then yet there's a DCEU movie that gets flack for setting up a bunch. So moving right along,
and that shit actually made sense when you hear out the story.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
That shit in Ultron didn't make sense either way with hindsight.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, we try to go into those retro reviews with like, oh yeah, you know, maybe hindsight that'll help fill in some blanks and everything, and maybe this movie will be a little bit better. No, not for Age of Ultron.
Yeah, it made it worse.
Yeah. All right, number 11, the villains aren't that bad. Real quick, they have a picture of Vulture in here. So
between Crossbones and the little frog motherfucker that George St. Pierre played.
Right. Yeah. So, very, very interesting. Let's see what Joshua has to say. If we had to choose between having well-constructed heroes and well-constructed villains in a superhero universe, we would take the heroes every time. That said, there's almost no excuse for how abysmal some of these Marvel villains are. Very seldom are they given a motivation or a reason to be doing anything that they're doing. They're just there to give the main characters something to fight in the end. Some MCU villains would say that the villains aren't that bad, though. In the case of the Vulture, Ego, and Hela, we would have to agree. Oh, okay, nice. However, just about every other bad guy is pointless, and we never understand them enough to care about them. Marvel definitely needs to fix this going forward, or they're going to lose their audience pretty quickly.
Ego is terrible, though.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like they're going to lose their audience quickly if they don't, because the audience is just gonna take whatever's spoon-fed to them. Number 10, each movie is a different genre. And then they have a picture of the Winter Soldier. So that's actually a pretty good argument. There's an ongoing discussion that each Marvel movie plays around with a different genre to stay varied. Captain America: The Winter Soldier was a political thriller. Spider-Man: Homecoming was a high school movie. Ant-Man was a heist film. What? Many MCU fans will refute any...
It took me a second there to get that.
Like, on what planet is Ant-Man a heist film? Nice. Many...
I'm sorry, that just took me so long to
yeah,
get.
it did. I was like, that was a long delay. But you're like, wait, what the fuck?
I had to read it for myself. I started reading it, and I'm like, wait, there's no way he just
Who
said
says that?
And then I got to it. Ant-Man was a heist film. Holy shit, he didn't... He completely failed. Anyway,
Wow.
go ahead.
All right. Many MCU fans will refute any complaints of the Marvel formula by referring to these movies as different genres within the superhero domain. Where this argument breaks down is the fact that while each movie definitively tries to fit into another genre, it only goes halfway. If you compare Ant-Man as a heist movie to Logan as a Western, there's no contest. Marvel needs to be willing to go all the way and take more risks if they want to claim that their movies are genres other than action. Fuck.
Okay, so Spider-Man: Homecoming was teenager Tony Stark in high school. It was Iron Man in high school. Ant-Man was Iron Man in a heist movie. And Doctor Strange was Magic Iron Man.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
So there's your formula.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. Just because you may change the idea of what's going on, the subsect of what it is, doesn't make it that it's still not formulaic as shit, because you always end up with the same results.
Well, yeah, and you sprinkle in largely a lot of the same shit, you know, where you're like, okay, here's another Marvel movie, and based on some of the early reactions to Infinity War, it almost sounds like it's going to be exactly the same. No matter what, even though this one is done by the Russo brothers. I will say Captain America: The Winter Soldier, when we did it in hindsight, you know, and I watched it again and gave it a second chance, that one does feel different. That one, to me, kind of stands on its own. I don't know if many others do, like the way that the Winter Soldier does. So I will, and I guess Guardians of the Galaxy, before anything else, it did stand on its own. That was one of those where you're like, oh, this one's different, you know, where it's largely comedy. Unfortunately, they have taken that and just blended it with fucking everything else as well. And I like how Joshua in this says they only go halfway. It tries to fit into another genre, it only goes halfway. That's very well put, because some of them, they do try, but ultimately it ends up being kind of the same, and you can tell that it almost feels like they're all made by the same director for the most part.
Sometimes, yeah. Because there is some glaring differences when you have like Iron Man 1 and 2 to Iron Man 3. The huge difference between that. Thor 1 and 2 to Thor 3. Big difference. But in the end, it still does the same. It still does the same shit. Because it's just how it all ends up. Formula is villain does something big in the beginning to introduce himself. Character needs reflection on his being and who he is or she, and then by the end of the movie, big battle, and they've been trying to experiment with different ways to beat the villain at the end that aren't traditional like one-on-one battles. They'll do something stupid like make a deal with a fart cloud, or let your whole fucking planet blow up and make a joke out of it. And, oh, look at it, so smart because of what they're doing. Oh, my God. Anyway, go ahead, number 9.
No, yeah, well put. Number 9, Spider-Man needed the reboot. What? All right. It's important to note that we like Tom Holland's portrayal of Spider-Man as well as his role in the MCU.
Who the fuck is we, Josh? You got a mouse in your pocket?
My dick that I whipped out, smacking all these MCU fans across the face with.
Well, these are starting to lighten up. They're starting to get dumber as we go down in the traditional CBR.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that when they get into 16. However, when you look at the wall crawler cinematic history, it starts to get a little confusing. Imagine how many people refused to see Spider-Man: Homecoming simply because it was a third attempt at a Spider-Man franchise in the last 10 years. Some people will argue that Spider-Man needed the reboot after the disaster that was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. We disagree. Marvel could have...
And that's why you're writing articles on CBR. And not anything better. Even though we're talking about this one.
Yeah, and not anything better. Marvel could have soft rebooted Andrew Garfield's character, making him feel like a classic version of Spider-Man that's still familiar, or brought back Tobey Maguire for one last hoorah. The point here is that Spider-Man didn't need a reboot. Marvel just wanted creative freedom. Matt and I have talked about this, I think, on multiple occasions of how well Spider-Man Homecoming did with the fact that it wasn't a reboot. It wasn't an origin story. It just branched off. He's already existed to an extent. It's an early in his career, still figuring himself out, but pretty cool. All right, number 8. The origin stories are all unique. What? Who says this shit?
I guess this is kind of leading up to what we were just talking about.
Yeah. Complaints of a Marvel formula didn't really start to surface until the release of Doctor Strange. Disagree.
Nah.
After that movie came out, people were starting to catch on that the origin stories of Stephen Strange, Scott Lang, and a few other MCU characters were strikingly similar to one another. While that's not true across the board, it becomes even more apparent when you realize that most of the heroes are pompous jerks who are seeking redemption. That said, there will always be those people who will argue the other way around. Because Stephen Strange is a doctor, Scott Lang is a convicted criminal, then they don't have similar origin stories. To be fair though, Marvel has used some variety in character introductions, like with Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Way to buy it back, Joshua. Number 7.
Bringing Thor to Earth served his character. Thor was the first out-of-left-field character that Marvel brought onto the big screen. How could they get audiences to care about the prince of a fictional Norse realm? However, they managed to pull it off, but that hasn't stopped the overall reception of the Thor franchise, save for Thor Ragnarok. In the first 2 Thor movies, the writers were so focused on keeping him on Earth that we never felt like he was a cosmic hero. Fans have argued that these movies were to serve his character, but Marvel could have easily had him take adventures on other planets so we could see a more eclectic side to the MCU while still giving him plenty of development. Character development is rarely defined by a particular planet.
Okay, he made this one up. Even fucking Nick, the ultimate Marvel fanboy, doesn't defend the first 2 Thors.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we did this on our review, but I actually enjoyed the first Thor, and I kind of liked what they did with it. And actually, some of the jokes, being that he is this cosmic god landing on Earth, they work for me. All right, number 6. Ant-Man didn't need Edgar Wright. Ant-Man ended up being directed by Peyton Reed and has been fairly well received, especially considering the caliber of the character in relation to the other juggernaut heroes of the MCU. And it's all thanks to a great performance by Paul Rudd and an excellent design for the suit. However, the movie is only a mere shadow of what it could have been, as Marvel originally had Edgar Wright signed on for the project. Unfortunately, Wright eventually left the project. Some fans will state that the movie didn't need Edgar Wright and that it was fine the way it was. But the reality is that Marvel limited the movie they could have had by letting Wright leave. Look at movies like Baby Driver and Hot Fuzz and imagine how a superhero movie would have been under that sort of style.
Yeah, agree. This is one of the big examples of where a director's vision was shut down by the mouse.
Yep. And there's, I do believe that there's largely a checklist when it comes to if you're going to sign on with them. The Russo brothers can push that envelope a little bit further. And most of the movies do feel a little bit different. But I feel like they say, okay, if you're going to come on, here's a checklist of what you have to have. And then that's when it gets into, okay, the villains have to be the same way. The jokes have to land the same way. The character development has to be, close to the same way. Speaking of character development, number 5, Iron Man has a consistent character development. Iron Man is the flagship character of the MCU, having started the franchise off. He has since carried the Avengers movies and been a big part of the franchise. He has made a total of 6 film appearances at the time of this writing. While he is developed in a very relatable and real way, there's a serious blemish on his arc. In Iron Man 3, there's a very confusing scene where Tony blows up all of the Iron Man suits and gets the shrapnel removed from his heart, seemingly giving up on being Iron Man. However,
thank you, Josh.
Right. However, going into Age of Ultron, he's already back in action out of nowhere. Still, some fans are ready to defend this movie, saying that he never quit being Iron Man. The blowing up of the suits was solely for Pepper to show his commitment.
Fucking A. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah. Matt actually brought this up on our Age of Ultron review of how it felt like Tony was multiple times. He's been like, all right, I'm moving on. I'm kind of giving up. And then boom, he's back at it. And then he's moving on. He's giving up. Boom, he's back at it again. And yep, good point. Number 4, it's great that the franchise is continuing. While the idea of the MCU was great at the start, audiences are starting to grow fatigued of the concept. With the franchise going on indefinitely, pushing on to a phase 4, there seems to be no end to the series. Furthermore, there are still end credit scenes that have no direct payoff or movie announcements. Some fans have stated that this is great for the series because it's just like the comics, but we disagree. By the franchise going on and on for an indefinite amount of time means that Marvel will burn themselves out eventually. If we had to give our best advice, it would be for Marvel to take a break after the defeat of Thanos. That way, their next movie...
Spoilers!
That way, their next movie a few years later would stir more excitement. Any thoughts on that?
No, that's just the continuing notion of superhero fatigue.
I have yet to see... Oh, okay, here's the thing. I do think there is somewhat of superhero fatigue. And I think one of the arguments...
It's really hard to say that after Black Panther made
a billion, yeah. I think that if we don't start to see a change, and Matt and I have talked about this multiple occasions, but if we don't start to see a change in how movies are developed, if they're not being in their own realm with their own formula, and like letting the directors take different superhero movies in different directions, people will start to get fatigued of the same bullshit. And I'm surprised that it hasn't happened with the MCU yet, because Black Panther, though a good movie with actually a great villain, it still feels like a Marvel movie. So you're kind of getting into the same trend of regurgitating the same stuff. So it'll be interesting to see. And this is actually a good point. It'll never happen, but it would be an interesting point to have Marvel take a break and then all of a sudden, boom, have it come back. I mean, look at the Star Wars franchise where, it was shit for the, 1, 2, and 3. Disney bought it, brought it back, and now, it's revamped again, reinvigorated.
And shit at 8.
Yeah, apparently. All right.
The Star Wars is ruined forever.
Number 3, the movies are taking plenty of risks. We've heard it before. There's criticisms that Marvel movies aren't taking too many risks. Due to being part of the Disney conglomerate, their movies are stylistically similar with sense of humor that are consistent across the board. On the other side of the coin, some fans feel that they've been taking risks. Sure, they've been inventive with Guardians of the Galaxy and having Taika Waititi direct Thor Ragnarok, but there hasn't been a lot apart from that. To say that Marvel plays it safe would almost be too easy of a jab. Going into MCU movie, you already know what to expect. There are a few surprises that Marvel is churning out these days. That's why the superhero fatigue is so prominent, as well as people seem to strongly anticipate for the release of Black Panther. Just a quick note, this article was written on January 16th of this year. So obviously before Black Panther.
Yeah, we're on it as always.
Yep.
4 months later.
Yep, as always. All right, number 2, the connected universe is always a good thing. Marvel took a serious risk when it came to the conception of their movies. Instead of just having tried and true sequels, they wanted to connect their movies in a way similar to the comic books. Thus was the birth of the cinematic universe. While it's easy to see how this approach can benefit their films, there are some serious drawbacks that are becoming more apparent as time goes on. First and foremost, there's a limit as to what Marvel can do with their films because of the larger plan on hand. It leads to movies being made that don't add anything to the overall story. On top of that, the TV shows take a serious hit as well, trying to be connected to the universe. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. suffered a serious problem during its first season due to being in the same universe as the Avengers.
Well, I think when Winter Soldier kicked in, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of becomes pointless. It's just agents.
Yeah, no shit. What's your thoughts on the connected universe? Just curious.
I think it's a great idea, but I think there's also an approach to it. I mean, the MCU has always done well. I've never been negative about that they do a good job at intersecting some of this stuff. And their big, team ups usually end up pretty okay. Well, we'll just go with they're about half and half so far. Anyway, it works. It works. I don't know why they have the TV shows tied in. TV shows should be their own thing and just explore their own ventures and shit like that. But I've never had a problem with the connected universe. I've always thought it's what it should have been. We've always should have had Batman and Superman in the same universe, and we always should have Thor, Iron Man, and Hulk in the same universe. So it doesn't make sense to me to keep just having individual movies when it's all potential right there.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I asked the question, because there's a lot of stuff. I just read this thing today. I'm sure you saw it, about Wonder Woman 2 not being called Wonder Woman 2, and that it almost kind of sounds like Patty Jenkins wants it to be its own individual film, not tied too much to anything else. That
God damn it, they keep saying that about every fucking movie. The Batman was supposed to be like this. Shazam is supposed to be like this. I'm done with that shit. Aquaman, apparently, I don't know what the fuck.
Aquaman definitely is tied to it, because they referenced Justice League.
Steppenwolf.
Yeah, and Steppenwolf.
I got that, but they'll find a way to say it wasn't connected.
Right? Yeah, it's
because remember they were trying to say this was going to be the soft reboot.
True.
For a while there, a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's going to be the soft reboot. They're going to use this to change the trajectory of the DCU." There it is, and then we don't know exactly until we see the movie. But every movie that ever DC's going to try to put out, this is the moment where they're straying away from the connected universe. This is the moment where they're trying to reboot it every fucking time.
Yeah, good.
The Joker origin movie.
Yeah. I hope that I like the idea of a connected universe. I think it was genius it wasn't a Disney thing. It was a Marvel thing. It was genius for them to start that whole approach of, we're going to have all these movies connected. I do think, that being said, you need to have your directors, maybe they need to follow a very soft line of like Patty Jenkins did, for example. She incorporated some things that needed to be incorporated, but for the most part, Wonder Woman can stand on its own as its own film. And I think that's what makes it important and a solid movie, is that it can kind of stand on its own, do its own thing, and it's the director's own vision. They don't have to blend, so much like the Marvel movies have done. But it would worry me if they start going back to, let's just do another trilogy, because what Marvel has done to incorporate all these different things and actually have some crossovers, with SpiderMan and, bringing Black Panther and all sorts of stuff. I think they've done a fantastic job. And I like the idea of having a connected universe. And like Matt said, Superman and Batman, they belong in the same universe. We need more movies like that. And not just one-offs where we have 30 Supermans in 10 years, or, and same thing with Batman. Who are we going to cast as Batman now? It's cool. Tony Stark has been in 6 different movies, and it's the same actor. Number 1, the special effects are always fantastic. We should...
Worst number 1 yet.
Yeah, that was a letdown. We should preface this by saying that Marvel special effects are mostly great. Sometimes they're fairly noticeable, but they never go to the Steppenwolf levels of bad. For example...
fuck you!
For example, some shots of Iron Man and Captain America Civil War are obviously put together with CGI. Fuck yeah, Joshua. Thank you. Thank you. There was always the horribly fake opening sequence to Avengers Age of Ultron. Still, the Marvel versus DC war must continue, which means that the fans of the MCU will constantly convince themselves that Marvel's special effects are perfect. Again, Marvel has done some impressive work with their special effects, but there are several examples of how they've messed up when using CGI. After all, there's a reason that no one talks about the Incredible Hulk. What? Fuck you. I just gave him
You're up and
high
down.
five. Yeah, now he's dissing on the Incredible Hulk. After all, there is a reason no one talks about the Incredible Hulk when talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe anymore. It's because they've changed actors, and I just talked about them not changing actors.
Yeah, way to go, man. Fucking go. Anyway. Yeah, special effects. I think that goes with any fucking movie. Every movie goes through ebbs and flows. Every universe, everything in a way, has some special effects issues in some manner. I mean, there's some parts of Justice League that looks great. There's some parts of Justice League that looks god fucking awful. Face, mustache, all that shit.
Yeah.
It's just how it goes. Sometimes things are worked on harder than others to present. Like we said with Age of Ultron, when Slakovia or whatever it is getting raised into the air, it looks fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
It looks great. But there's other parts where just everything else looks like shit. Fucking Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought kind of, number 2, I thought it looked like shit a lot of the time, especially when they're dealing with Ego and being on the planet and being on Ego and everything. I didn't think it looked very good at all. Like when Gamora's walking through the desert or whatever, and Yeah, I just didn't like how it looked, and then like Ego himself, I just didn't like how it looked at all. Maybe it was just too bright, maybe too colorful, but I always thought that green screen and the CGI on that work was subpar.
Yeah.
But overall, that's a terrible number 1, and I think we should just give up on Josh.
We should give up on CBR overall, but however, they do give us usually some material. Here we are recording an episode, and they can a lot of times they provide us with pretty entertaining bullshit where we're like, are you fucking kidding me? I am kind of surprised. I wonder who says some of this shit, but you know, there you have it. He made a 16 list article.
Oh my God, here we go. Here's something for the MCU fans that are fucking terrible. You know, make it 17 things now. Number 1 is MCU fans that just can't even fucking take an article serious. I looked at the comments. I don't know why. First comment pops up. A better title would have been 16 Reasons the Author Bashes the MCU.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was bashing. That was hardcore. I've never seen so much beat down on fucking on a universe before.
And that thing has 16 thumbs up. Fuck you, Andrew.
Oh, you're looking at it?
I clicked on it just because I was curious. Wow.
I think that was written by a grumpy Batman.
Oh my gosh. And then someone says you're being unnecessarily derogatory to Batman. This was written by a grumpy grump. Oh, got him.
Fuck, they're laying down the smackdown in this comment
not
section.
Not a grumpy grump. Oh my gosh.
Well, here we go. Here's a good one. Go do that, Jacob McAdams. Agreed. The MCU sucks to me.
one like.
Oh, I like how this guy uses the word. Winter Soldier was extremely a political thriller. Guardians of the Galaxy was extremely comedy space opera. What the fuck is going halfway with a genre? I guess you got to go to the extreme.
Wow.
God damn, the comments are better than the article.
No shit. That's so great. You're being unnecessarily derogatory to Batman. This was written by a grumpy grump.
In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. You're one of very few to make it to the end.
Yes, thank you very much.
Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Comic Movie Marks Podcast and hit the notification bell. You know, all these fucking YouTube channels say this shit, so I'm going to say it now.
Yes, it's perfect. And if you want to hear our full podcast, you can check out our podcast on iTunes or any other podcast subscription service.
Make sure you subscribe. Thanks again.